I still remember that morning like it's burned into my skin. The smell of toast, the clink of silverware, the sound of a little girl's laugh cutting through the brunch crowd. Her name was Lily Hart. I was just a server at a fancy Chicago restaurant. White tablecloths, senators, and CEOs sipping champagne at 10 in the morning, and I'd learned to keep my head down. You smile, you serve, you disappear. That's the rule. But that day when Lily's face went pale and her tiny hands shook like leaves, the rule broke. I scooped her up without thinking, ran straight into the street screaming for a cab, praying anybody would believe me. I threw crumpled bills at the driver, crashed through the ER doors at Lakeside Medical Center yelling for help. My apron still smelled like coffee and lemon polish, and my heart was a hammer in my chest. The doctor grabbed Lily, took one look at her blue lips, and said the word that cracked everything open: poisoned. My knees went weak. Poisoned. She'd just been drawing a smiley face and jelly on her toast. Nothing made sense. Then the doors slammed open again. In stormed Mason Hart, her father. He's one of those men you see on magazine covers. Tall, tailored suit, a whole world bending to his checkbook. Only this time his tie was crooked, his eyes black with rage. He saw me holding his daughter, and something snapped. "What did you do to her?" he roared. I tried to speak, but his fist hit me first. My head spun the sterile hallway, tilting sideways. Another blow to my ribs, another to my shoulder. "You filthy liar. You think someone like you belongs anywhere near her," he spat. Nurses froze, security guards stayed glued to the walls. I was on my knees, arms up, bleeding, begging him to listen. And then, "Get off her, man," a voice thundered. That was Marcus, the dishwasher, who'd become like a little brother to me. He yanked Mason back, eyes blazing. "She saved your kid, you idiot," Mason sneered. Two rats in the same sewer, and stormed out, vowing I'd never work in the city again. And just like that, I was alone on the ER floor, shaking uniform, soaked in blood and sweat, whispering, "I didn't hurt her. I didn't hurt her." Like a prayer no one heard. The hospital stabilized Lily, but she stayed unconscious. Meanwhile, the world decided I was guilty. Mason's lawyers moved fast. Headlines bloomed with my name, and strangers online called me everything but a child of God. Marcus, though, he didn't give up. He started digging delivery logs, security footage, who touched what in the kitchen. One night he called me over to his laptop, his face tight. "Look at this," he said. There on the screen was footage of Veronica Hale Mason's executive assistant, the woman who'd booked his flights and babysat his scandals, slipping a vial into a pouch near the prep counter. Moments later, that pouch landed with Carla, the waitress who served Lily. I stared at the footage, my stomach dropping. Veronica wasn't some stranger. She'd been at that restaurant that morning wearing a smile like steel. "Why would she do this?" I whispered. Marcus's voice was grim. 6 years ago, her son was killed by a drunk exec from Hart Industries. The guy walked free thanks to Mason's lawyers. I felt the air leave my lungs. This wasn't about me. This was about revenge, and I was the scapegoat. We took the footage straight to Mason. He sat behind his glass desk, staring at me like a ghost he couldn't name. Marcus slid the USB drive across. "Your assistant planted the poison," he said. Mason's face barely moved. "Veronica has worked for me for years," Marcus shot back. "And she buried her son while you buried the truth." 10 minutes later, Veronica walked into the office. Mason hit play on the footage. She went pale. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered. "Just a scare. I wanted you to feel it, the terror of losing a child." Mason's jaw tightened. "You tried to take mine." "No," she said, eyes wet. "I just wanted you to hurt." After that day, Mason showed up at the hospital alone. No lawyers, no cameras. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "I believed the worst because I saw your skin before your heart." My lip was still split, my face still swollen. You did destroy me, I answered. He nodded slowly. Let me start fixing it. I didn't take his check or his lawyer's. I just said, tell your daughter I hope she gets better. Tell her I never stopped caring. But Marcus wouldn't let it end there. He kept digging and uncovered something darker: emails between Veronica and a man named Kingsley, a strategic advisor buried in the corporate charts. Should we proceed with phase 2, she'd written. Kingsley replied, keep pressure on the waitress. She's becoming a liability. My name was on a list labeled high emotional leverage. They had targeted me long before the poisoning. That's when I walked into the Office of Corporate Ethics and became a whistleblower. It was like stepping off a cliff. Marcus stood beside me the whole way. We handed over everything: the emails, the footage, the timeline. A case opened. The headlines flipped. The public started to see me not as a monster, but as a witness. But the higher we climbed, the scarier it got. Kingsley's network was big consultants, PR firms, shell companies, people who built entire careers on destroying voices like mine. One night, Marcus and I snuck into the basement archives of Hart Industries, using an old badge he'd kept from freelance IT work. The hallway smelled like toner and secrets. We found a box marked B47, stuffed with narrative control memos, lists of workers who'd been discredited or fired, payment logs to crisis consultants. And there was my name again. Use controlled incident to discredit and remove. My hands shook as I read it. They planned to ruin me before Lily ever got sick, I whispered. Marcus's jaw tightened. We take this public. Now. We didn't get the chance. A voice echoed from the shadows. You shouldn't be here. Kingsley himself stepped out with a private guard. He looked calm, almost amused. You think you'll leak this and make me the villain? He smirked. Marcus snapped. You weaponized a child to manipulate a man's empire. Kingsley shrugged. I guided outcomes. Don't confuse the two. My blood boiled. This ends tonight, I said, holding the file to my chest. He nodded at the guard, who reached into his jacket. And then another voice cut through. Put the gun away. Mason Hart stepped out of the dark. His face was gray eyes, flat. I've been listening for 5 minutes, he said. Kingsley, you're done. Kingsley sneered. You don't have that power anymore. Mason gestured at me. She does. And in that instant, I understood the truth wasn't in my hands. It was mine. Police arrived minutes later. Kingsley was arrested. The guard disarmed. And I stood there clutching the folder like it was a newborn. Headlines exploded. Whistleblower breaks. Corporate cover-up, attempted sabotage exposed. The Department of Justice opened an inquiry. Mason resigned as CEO. He funded scholarships in my name, but I didn't take a victory lap. I built the Justice Kitchen, a grassroots network for workers who'd been silenced. We started small, just a few of us in a borrowed office, but the stories poured in: janitors, teachers, nurses, drivers. People whose lives had been twisted into liabilities. Of course, the machine fought back. They launched a smear campaign painting me as a manipulator, even firebombed our first headquarters. But each time they tried to erase us, more people showed up. Volunteers rebuilt the wall, painted new murals, lit new candles. One woman from Texas sent 1,000 blank journals for stories yet to be told. We turned ashes into a kitchen strong enough to feed justice to anyone who walked through our doors. Months later, I testified before Congress about the Lullaby Protocol. That's what Kingsley had called it. I told them about being marked, about how corporations were running intelligence operations on their own employees, turning trauma into a business plan. My hands shook, but my voice didn't. I was beaten, humiliated, fired, and framed for poisoning a child I was trying to save, I said. And when I tried to explain, the system closed its ears. But I'm still here, and I'm not alone. The hearings sparked new laws, new protections, and a national conversation. Mason stood at a press conference, gray hair, open collar, telling the world, "She saved my daughter. I nearly destroyed her. We owe her more than words." But for me, the real victory wasn't the cameras. It was Lily, now awake and smiling, handing me a crayon drawing of the two of us holding hands. Above our heads in crooked letters she wrote, "You're my hero. I still work some shifts at the restaurant, believe it or not. Not for the paycheck, but to remind myself where I came from." Sometimes a stranger will stop me, an older woman at the coffee shop, a teenager on the bus, and just nod. Not a speech, not a selfie, just a nod. That small acknowledgement carries decades of silence cracking open. And yet I know this isn't over. The people who built systems to erase us don't vanish overnight. They're still out there, hidden behind shell companies and strategy memos. We're still digging, still lighting candles for each new whistleblower. Because this fight isn't about revenge, it's about making sure the next waitress, the next janitor, the next kid in the wrong place at the wrong time doesn't get buried under lies. That's my story. I was supposed to disappear. Instead, I spoke. And in speaking, I found an army of people who'd been waiting to be heard. We turned our pain into a megaphone. We built something that outlived the noise. So I want to ask you, what do you think? Was Mason just another man blinded by bias or part of something bigger? Have you ever seen someone judged by their skin, their job, their accent before their heart? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me about the moment you decided enough was enough. Because justice isn't a single courtroom victory. It's a daily decision to stand to speak and to believe every voice matters. And maybe, just maybe, if we keep telling the truth, one day the world will stop mistaking courage for a crime.